we understood the world and if we understood ourselves, that's worth everything.
ESP NXIVM is a methodology that allows people to optimize their behavior.
NXIVM is the umbrella company. Keith was the founder.
He was a legend.
Our main belief is to have people experience more joy in their lives.
It's a worldwide organization.
When conventional solutions don't work, maybe the unconventional way of thinking does.
I was looking around at all these people that just didn't seem joyful. I started to get concerned.
There's a secret organization in NXIVM. They sign a lifetime vow of obedience, and they're branding girls.
And they're trying to recruit other women to do this.
I'm so strong. Like, you'd never be able to do what I just did.
I always want to earn my authority.
There's a lot of things about the organization. It's just not right.
Our commitment is our power. You stay.
There's no good way to leave. Ever.
I have to expose what's going on. This has to be stopped.
There are a group of people we're going to the press. We are filing criminal charges.
You're branding my wife.
Everybody is a blend of good and bad.
We're playing some sort of game. Chances are I'm going to win.
Nobody joins a cult. They join a good thing.
Hello and welcome to the Cinemondo podcast with Kathy, Mark, and Burke, talking about movies, horror, sci-fi, unusual, unknown, forgotten, documentaries, underappreciated, always interesting. Today we're going to talk about something really interesting. It's a documentary series. It's two documentary series about the same thing. We've done that before. We did that with the Fry Festival, where you get two sets of documentaries and each one has something the other one doesn't have.
Well, one fills in the blanks from the other one.
Yeah.
And I always feel like when there's two documentaries about the same topic, I feel like you think, oh, I'll just have to pick one. But a lot of times, like even with the Fire Festival documentaries, watching both is still really cool. And also they're so different, and the same in this case, that they are both worth watching.
Right.
They complement each other. You go, oh, okay, here's filling in the blanks because I really didn't know about that character, and then I'm getting a little bit more from the other documentaries. So these two are both great in completely different ways. One is a 9-parter and one is a 4-parter. So one is obviously longer, has a lot more sort of, maybe depth to it. Whereas the second one is a little shorter, more comprehensive. more condensed.
Yeah.
So, but they're both good.
But what we're talking about is the two documentaries about the cult, the NXIVM cult. And it's NXIVM spelled NXIVM, which is, I don't know what it stands for. I don't know if we ever are told that, but there's all these.
Well, it almost seems like numbers.
Yeah. It's like.
The V is like a 5 or something, but it's not really. It's very pretentious,
The whole thing. We'll get into the whole problems with it.
Least of problems is the pretentiousness of the name. Yeah.
But I do want to say something about these documentaries, about the whole thing up front, is that when you watch things like this, it's really easy to judge people who fall into these kind of things. But I really don't want to judge the people who got sucked into this thing, because clearly people, good people get pulled into horrible situations, and to sort of put people down for getting sucked into something like this, you have to put down basically the entire world, for getting sucked into supernatural cults here and there of this type or that type. But people sometimes can be very vulnerable, and their intent is good when they get involved in something like this. What they want ultimately is to make themselves better. Like somebody in the film says, nobody joins a cult. It's like what they joined was a thing that they thought was going to make them a better person and a stronger person and, enlightened person. And for that, we have to sort of, not that they need our forgiveness, but we do have to say, okay, it happens and there's no shame in it as long as you get out of it eventually, hopefully. but
these are really smart people.
Yeah, they're smart, successful.
We're talking
doctors,
professors, filmmakers, salespeople. I mean, these are successful people that, for whatever reason, personal reason, they got involved in this to better themselves professionally or personally. And that's how it starts.
Well, let's back up and talk about what it is they're involved in, which is
it's
NXIVM,
the NXIVM Cult.
which is basically self-help. It's kind of like Tony Robbins in a way, but Tony Robbins is like the good version of it, and then this is like the bad version of it. But it's the same in a way. It's sort of the same lure, is that they want you to, be more successful, more in control of your life, be financially solvent, they promise you a lot of breakthroughs so that people who feel like they're not quite able to make success happen, that they can do it if they just push past these certain barriers they put up for themselves, which is some damage or some old fears or, injury, psychic injury, some kind of, promise, like Scientology too, of letting you be a better person somehow, because it's sort of your problem. You're being held back by yourself in a way.
And it starts out with those ideas of multi-level marketing. It starts out with that idea that, hey, it's like there's a lot of scams that operate like this too. It's like when you come in, suddenly it's your job to recruit more people to come in. So you get a little cut of that. So in a way, it's this self-replicating money machine when you look at it from the outside. When you look at it and you're like, wow, that in theory seems like a very cool thing to do. Like if I become a salesperson and I start selling these products and I get a cut of what I'm selling, that means that the harder I work, the more money I will make. And with these kind of culty things, a lot of times what it is it's like if you're not successful, they blame you and they say that it's because you are not working hard enough, or it's because you don't believe enough. It's because you're not praying enough. It's because you're not contributing enough. And so then you're like, then I'll give some more. I'll give some more money. I'll get deeper into the studies,
Well, the solve is always take another class, pay some more money, take another class, pay some more money. That's always like, you're never going to be successful if you don't get up to this tier, if you don't get this color of sash, if you don't get this level. They each have their levels. There's kind of a reward system, kind of like where you get the belt in karate, different colors, different stripes, and so you can see this almost like a video game. You're trying to attain the status,
It's dangling the carrot. So like at a dojo, you start out as a white belt, and then you move up, and then you move up to a brown belt, and up hopefully to a black belt. That's your goal. Here, your goal is to get up there with the leader of this NXIVM cult, a gentleman by the name of Keith Raniere, who is this self-professed brilliant guy who's got a 240 IQ. He's a concerto pianist who's brilliant in everything he's done. He started a company called Consumers Byline in the 90s, which was multi-level marketing, as Burke mentioned. And he just started this thing, NXIVM, and to get people to better themselves professionally and personally. And he has whatever that magnetism is, whatever that is, people bought into his theories and his ideas.
Well, the thing that's kind of funny about it was an escalation, because it started out, it's not all bad ideas. Like, it was not like you go in like with the intention, I'm going to join this cult and it's going to be evil and horrible and perverted and it'll be all great. You go in because you hear things that are resonating with you about, like, you can't succeed because you're afraid to do public speaking. Well, we can help you with that. We can help you do public speaking. It becomes so simple. And then you take the next level. Hey, don't just do public speaking. Be like an inspiring public speaker. Take this next class, So they try and address your fears, but at the same time, they try and make you not trust your fears, so that when you're starting to sort of question, as you're escalating in what they're asking you to do and the kind of money you're paying out, and even like what some of the things you're supposed to accept, with some of the more radical ideas, they come at such little tiny chunks, and by that point you're so worn down by not trusting your own instincts, because you can't trust your own instincts because they've been holding you back. So it's this whole mind manipulation of, you're only afraid because you have this damage, so why don't you go get an EM, is what they call them, where they talk you out of your fear that you rightfully should have, and then then you can keep moving on and paying them more money and letting them manipulate you.
That's the thing, that a lot of cults rely on, this commitment and an investment. And once you've invested a certain amount of money in something, it becomes harder and harder to quit that thing, because you want to get your value out of the money, and you also don't want to be wrong. People really want to, I mean, if you've invested in some of these people in these documentaries, you hear how much money they gave. It's like, $50,000 and, tons of money. And if you're in an organization that you've invested that much in, it's really hard to just say, I'm going to walk away. I'm bailing. You feel connected to it. You feel beholden to it, because it's almost like you're buying a house with this thing. It's like, I've got to follow through with it now, because I'm in it this far. I remember some experiments that I did many years ago with Scientology, where I kind of pretended to sort of join. Don't tell anyone. But I went through a little bit of it until the money stuff started kicking in. And it was like, I could see where people, if you're a little bit vulnerable, if you're a little bit doubting yourself, if you have low self-esteem, and in those years, I think I did. And I wasn't ever really tempted, because I'm super skeptical about things like that. But I did get a sense of, like Kathy was saying, that there is something there. But the problem with that is there's something in a lot of places. I mean, it's like, if you just take like Keith Raniere in this NXIVM Cult, he took a little bit from here, he took a little bit from there, and he took a little bit from, Ayn Rand, and he took stuff from, and it's all that stuff that sounds empowering and it sounds good, especially if you've studied the types of narrative ways of speaking. It's hard to explain. It's like I think it's called neurolinguistics, which is something that his partner Nancy Salzman studied. And what it is basically what Hitler's folks studied as far as their speeches. They would rehearse their speeches in front of mirrors, and like, should I do this gesture in this word, or should I do this gesture, or should I do this, or should I save this for this word, or should I just stop and look at the audience for a moment and let it sink in, and then quietly start saying something else, and then get it. It's like there's these techniques, and they're
they kind of hypnotize you.
Yeah, and they're contrived. And unfortunately, you see people speaking like this. You see those old films of Hitler, and then you see footage of Keith Raniere, and you see the audience, and they're just wrapped up in this guy. They're like, whatever he's saying, it may not even be hitting him on a real intellectual level, but it's hitting him on a emotional level. And I have known some people in my life who have, and they call it sometimes charisma. And it's something that a lot of actors have. And it's the kind of thing that's a little bit scary sometimes when you like an actor and you say that thing about them. I can't take my eyes off of them. That's a weird thing. In other words, you are focused in on that actor. And it's like, what if that actor came into your life and started telling you things and you couldn't take your eyes off of them? You know what I mean?
I would believe anything Nick Cage told me.
Yeah, I know.
It's funny too, because when people talk about Keith Raniere, a lot of them say he seemed kind of dweeby, like they didn't buy it. They're like, I don't get it. When you meet him, you're like, I don't know about this. But then for some reason, he wins them over. What I think is interesting about the production of The Vow, which is an HBO documentary, it's like 9 parts, I think. Nine episodes.
9 episodes. There's going to be a second season too, by the way.
Yeah, I can't wait. Yeah. Give me the trial. But the director, and I'm not sure how to say her name, but Jehane, Noujaim, and Karim Amer. Now, Jehane actually took classes from NXIVM. She actually took classes, and they were originally going to make her a subject in the documentary. She decided she only took them for a few weeks, so she didn't feel like she was an expert, so she didn't. But I like that you have a director who isn't just on the outside looking in. Like, she actually went in and got kind of a feel for it. But she started hearing the rumors about stuff going on and said, not for me,
Well, it's an inside the Vow. I mean, and the second documentary series called Seduced, which is also available. It's a 4-part series. Watch that one second after you watch the first season of The Vow.
Seduced is on STARZ. and
Okay.
the Vow is on
HBO.
I believe HBO. Yeah.
But
Also, kind of interesting. The director was actually recruited by Sarah Bronfman.
No kidding.
Bronfman. Yeah. And
Yeah,
that to me is like the key to part of the appeal. And, is the, in a way you're getting sort of someone vouching for them that is famous, successful, rich. So you feel like if all of these people, like actors and, millionaires, are supporting this guy and his organization, it must work, right?
Well,
So you feel like in a way it's safe because they're in it,
Scientology does that too.
Yep.
With the Tom Cruise thing and everybody else, that they really, really love having celebrities. And you get the impression, you start thinking these techniques, all these techniques. That's the other thing that you see in this film. And I've read so much about this. I've been interested in cult behavior for a lot of my life. I read so much about the Mansons and the Jim Jones and the Heaven's Gate and all that kind of stuff. And one of the things that they did in this that was interesting, when you first sign up for the NXIVM thing, you go and you sit and you watch videos on a big monitor. And you see Nancy Salzman. She gives you these speeches on video, and you sit there and watch. And I think it was like 5 days or something. And the presenters tell you what a wonderful, great woman, they tell you how wonderful and great she is, and how wonderful and great, Keith Raniere is. And they say, you'll probably, they basically say you'll probably never meet him because he's like he's vanguard. And Nancy Salzman, you probably never meet her because she's so busy and such a huge celebrity all over the world. And she's good friends with the Dalai Lama and everything, And then at the end of that, Nancy Salzman emerges into the room after they've been seeing her on video. And that's an old technique too, where you present somebody on video long enough, people start thinking, whether subconsciously or consciously, this is a celebrity. This is a famous person. This is a TV person. And I've seen this person on a screen in a presentation or production. And now she's here in the room with me, and she's looking at me and paying attention to me. And these people felt like, wow. And the presenters of it were like, whoa, she hardly ever does this. This is amazing. She's actually here. Oh my God.
You're so special.
Classic.
You have an opportunity to meet Nancy. And then it's like the thing, Keith Raniere is like, oh, he's way out of your reach. You'll never get near him. And then slowly you get to meet Keith Raniere, and it's like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Well, the reason this worked, because Sarah and Claire Bronfman are heirs to the Seagram's liquor fortune.
Right.
Their dad is just a multi-billionaire. So he gets those two in, and all of a sudden there's this huge influx of cash, and they can do whatever they want. They can
like sue people constantly.
Yeah. And then, but it brings in people that are professionals, like Sarah Edmondson, Bonnie Piesse, who's an actress, Mark Vicente, who's a filmmaker, Allison Mack, who obviously is a big player in this.
A couple actresses from Battlestar Galactica.
Yeah, Nikki Klein is one of them. And on and on and on. So if you're there as just a regular Joe going in, you go, my God, these actors and these filmmakers and these big, people, doctors are involved. This must be legit. And the Seagram's fortune is backing a lot of this. So the legitimacy factor is very high. For
there
next
was a lot of things that sort of exploited that money thing too. Like they had those weekends, the big summer camp. They called it like summer camp for adults, and it was basically like to celebrate the birthday of the great vanguard.
V Week.
And it
was so preening. When he was sitting in the audience and everyone has to put on some show for him, and they all did these big productions. It was almost unbearable to watch him sitting there going, "This is all for me."
Yeah.
It's just like, oh
and
God,
kissing everybody on the mouth, and
kisses everyone on the lips, men and women. Like,
there is a lot of repulsive stuff. You watch this as an outsider, and you sort of go, how did these smart, educated, or people get sucked in? And this is what the Vow shows you, how it could happen. You can't be high and mighty from the outside. I'd never join this. I consider myself not a joiner at all.
Yeah.
But there are people that are perfectly normal people that got into it. And after they're out of it, they go, my God, what happened to me?
Yeah. I think one of the most compelling people was Mark Vicente. Because he actually had like, a really cool documentary came out. Like, what was it called? What the bleep
do we know? And that's, I have to.
I haven't seen it, so
I haven't seen it, but he apparently has some cred from that. But I really liked him throughout the entire series. I thought you could see, because he wasn't tricking anyone. He legitimately was passionately involved, believing all of this, like what was happening. He didn't know about any of the bad stuff, which we can talk about soon. Yeah. So when the rumors start happening, he met, Bonnie, the actress from Star Wars. She starts having her doubts. And so she's involved with Mark Vicente. So they're both in this group together. She decides to leave. So this becomes like a big wedge in the relationship because he still believes Raniere. Like and you see this guy and he's smart and he's like legitimate. So I feel like somebody like him would be a way in for a lot of people because he's not malevolent. He honestly believes he's helping people. It's just when you get to the other side of that, which Mark Vicente never really was, even though he's high up in the organization. So when he decides to leave, I feel like the show really takes off following the journey of Sarah Edmondson, who was another high-level recruit, and then Mark Vicente, seeing how they leave and what they want to do and all the guilt for bringing in so many people to this horrible organization. And they feel like they have to do something about it. And then they join forces with Catherine Oxenberg, who's basically lost her daughter India to the organization. And so they kind of become like this like team trying to expose this group. And that is so compelling to watch. And it really reminded me a lot of the West Memphis 3 movement that Burke and I were involved in, this sort of behind the scenes and then trying to right a wrong and, all the obstacles you would run into, people who believe, people who don't believe. The only thing we had, really, going for us in the West Memphis 3 is that we didn't have a high powered organization who would sue us if we said anything,
right.
Which is how they kept a lot of their, the people who, the people who left, kept them quiet was by threatening to sue, which they also talked to a lot of those people. So it was a really intimidating, like stronghold on these people. And then people left in the organization were told about what traitors these people who left were horrible. Like they would become the enemy. And it was so heartbreaking just to watch some of these people trying to grapple with what they'd done and, who they got involved and then you see these old videos of them like, it's so great. And they're doing their little song and dance. And it's so painful. And I can only imagine how painful it is for them to see that because it's always
well, I think,
and that's another thing too quick. They record everything. Yes, and that's why the documentary is so great. They videotape everything. They record every conversation they have with Raniere seems to be recorded. I mean, they have all of this condemning audio and video of Raniere saying the worst shit in the world. And also just being just a little putz, which he was.
Yeah, I think, Kathy, I agree with you. It really takes off when Mark decides to leave and teams up with Sarah and Nippy and all these other people. And they meet this guy, Frank Parlato, who used to be the PR man for Keith Raniere. And he has this blog that, is all the stuff that's negative about NXIVM, but he's sort of this outlier guy. So Catherine Oxenberg, who's this, gorgeous, actress, comes from royalty, her blood. And she ends up going to like Buffalo, New York with this guy, Frank Parlato and his lawyer.
That was so funny.
Yeah. It was just great. It was just this confluence of different people mixing together for this one goal is to figure out like, how do we get this guy, Keith and NXIVM, in front of a courtroom, in front of a judge. And it's fascinating. It's 9 episodes, but it's really well made. And
it's funny. I just went to the Frank report to see if he was still reporting, and he is.
Oh yeah.
And the first the first article on the site right now, the latest article is Bill Maher compares Keith Raniere to Donald Trump. You know what's so funny about that? When I was watching this, I kept thinking, this is Donald Trump.
Absolutely.
Because he's using all the same techniques to like hypnotize and draw in these people who will then, separate from everyone around them, not trust anyone else but them, not question anything that seems a little off to them, because then you just sort of turn it in on yourself saying, oh, that's just me, trying to, go back to my old damaged self. I'm more enlightened now, so I don't need to worry about this stuff. It's like, it reminds me so much of a Trump cult.
You know what it is? It's prosperity gospel. It's every TV evangelist, every mega church. It's the guy on stage doing that whole us versus them. We are the good people. They are the bad people. They're going to burn in hell. They're going to be tortured, and we're going to be up in heaven laughing at them. And we're going to get whatever we want. We're going to get wealth and riches. And all you have to do is, pay me and give me money.
That is total cult shit.
Oh yeah,
and it comes like Keith Raniere didn't invent this. Donald Trump didn't invent this. It goes back to Jim Jones and Heaven's Gate and Branch Davidian, back and farther.
It's probably
and farther.
the oldest profession. I mean,
snake oil, basically,
way before that. So it's nothing new. So it's amazing that they can always get away with it. But if it's smart, if it's done in a smart way, if it's compelling, if you got that carrot, hey, I can make you, public speaking will go, your fear that'll go away, or your sales will go up if you just come to this 3-day seminar, then they got you.
And also everyone has a lot of people have the same concerns about themselves, about the value of their life, and about their worth as a person, and their contribution to the world, and all these things, all these questions that we sometimes, and we have those dark nights of the soul. We're like, who am I? What am I? Why are we here? All those questions that we have, those big existential, nighttime can't sleep questions. And if somebody comes,
I hate those.
But if somebody comes along and says, I know what you're talking about, and they relate to you, it's a lot of, that's why a lot of psychologists are, psychology uses a scientific method, of course, but there's other versions of that use the sort of magical thinking versions of that, where they promise you things that come from supernatural places. And one of the things I have to say, Mark Vicente comes across as a good guy in this, and he, his intent is good. But his film and book, the What the Bleep Do We Know? I remember when that came out, and I thought, I read the premise, and I'm really into science. I love science. I try to learn everything I can, and I really do know the difference between science and superstition, and science and the supernatural, or
pseudoscience,
pseudoscience. Yeah. And this film is like one of the most horrible examples of pseudoscience, where they take quantum physics, which everybody has heard that term, and some of the concepts of quantum physics, there's these, there's the things like particle entanglement and wave particle duality and all these things that you can't explain it to somebody in 4 minutes. You have to sit them down and draw pictures, and even still, some of the best physicists in the world, Richard Feynman, probably one of the smartest people who ever walked the earth, said, if a physicist claims to understand quantum physics, he's lying. He's not really a physicist, because it's so strange and so hard to wrap your head around. It's so different at that level, at the quantum realm. But then there's people who take that stuff, and because it's so hard to understand and so hard to interpret, they apply these supernatural things to it. They attach a consciousness or a benevolence or this sort of caring entity that loves us and wants to help us, and all these things that have roots in quantum physics that don't have roots in the supernatural, but they apply these supernatural terms to it, and they turn it into this one of these prosperity gospel things, these materialistic, if you concentrate and visualize, you can get great wealth. Just imagine $1 million. Imagine it very, very hard. And using quantum physics, it will manifest like Schrodinger's cat, or they'll use something like, the fact that the Heisenberg's uncertainty principle proves that if you close your eyes, the world disappears. So therefore, you create the universe with your consciousness. And they use all this stuff and they apply it. And that's what part of these cults, the NXIVM thing, that's a little bit of what Keith Raniere was trying to impart to people. And I think that's why he liked Mark Vicente, because Vicente's film took those magical terms, the wishful thinking stuff, and applied it to something that sounds like science. And if you talk about quantum physics, you sound smart. But then if you apply these things and say you can use quantum physics to gain wealth and to get success and to feel your value in the world and to be enlightened, and that's dishonest to me. That's subverting what science really is. And unfortunately, Mark Vicente's film and book, What the Bleep Do We Know? It's one of the very few films that I've ever seen that really made me angry.
Well, it shows you like why maybe Raniere also like appreciated having him there to work on his 10-year epic film he was trying to make that he never really let Mark Vicente finish, because that was sort of the way he kept him, hooked in to, and Mark believed him, and seeing him evolve, like seeing him realize what he'd been doing all this time and what a waste it was and how he fell for it. In fact, I think one of the most powerful moments for me was where his wife had left. He was trying to figure it out. And he goes, I just took a moment, because he'd been defending Raniere the whole time, like defending him. And he wouldn't talk to her about it. He goes, we just can't talk about this stuff. It's like, a Democrat and Republican being in the same family. We just can't talk about it.
Yeah.
So there's a moment where he goes, I just sat and I thought, and it gives me chills almost, because it's such a human moment. I just let myself believe it for a second. Let me just sit, and let's just say it's all true. He goes, and I just let it sink in that this is real. And all of a sudden it all made sense, Oh my God.
Meaning what she was telling him,
the bad things she was saying, all the manipulation and the sex cult stuff that he thought was just bogus. It was just all like, people trying to tear down Raniere. And so when he finally said, I'm just going to sit for a second and try and believe it. And it's amazing to see how that cracked him open, And so that to me was super powerful to hear about that, because that's really what it takes. And it took a long time for him, even with his wife begging him, please listen to me.
She is one of the heroes.
It took she was so massive. There were other women they talked to in the film, but she's the one on camera. Her and Sarah Edmondson, who was also like Mark, very high up, very successful within the organization. They went for their little,
Proctors or Proctor, or
Proctor, second line, this and that. Yeah. It's just when DOS happened, which was the women's group, that everything started really falling apart. And to me, it's like that. To me, shows the example of the elevation of the power and the control Raniere thought he had.
Corruption.
Yes, and this
purely, full on.
The brilliance of him was he could look at Mark Vicente and say, "I know what I'm going to use you for." Salzman, I know what I'm going to use you for. Actresses, successful people. And so that was his brilliance. He was building this, community where it was all servicing him. And then it went to that, DOS went to that way over the line times 100, where he eventually got caught, but just that whole stuff is just, it's mind-boggling. But you have to be in NXIVM for a long, long time to be able to accept that I'm going to get, branded, and do these kind of things, these things that are just, tough to talk about.
And that was also the sort of manipulation aspect of, like, he conceived of this DOS group, which was, and I don't know the name of it, because
it's just faux Latin bullshit.
Yeah, it's DOS. Yeah, it's basically dominant, submissive, whatever.
Right.
So basically, it's an all women's group, has nothing to do with NXIVM. It's just women supporting each other, and we're gonna make each other stronger. And so they form like this, female empowerment group. Little beknownst to them that this was all Raniere's idea. It was part of his manipulation, is to have this full-on sex cult of women who would just service him at any moment. He had literally had a harem, which is what it turned into.
They called it master and slave. They used the
so
term.
Yeah, you had to do these ridiculous like drills where they would wake you up at 4 a.m. You had to be ready to do whatever they said. You had to ask your master for, how many calories you could have. Right. Could you go outside now? You're going to do, and if you didn't, if you're too late, you have to do this penance, which would be like taking a cold shower, or like just,
text within 1 minute to say ready, man.
Right.
And a lot of it's like sleep deprivation seemed to be the key to all of this. He would have these volleyball games at 3 a.m, And I remember they would say you'd get this text and you'd have to show up. You just have to run and get to the volleyball thing. And they have this scene where he's talking to Alice Mack, the actor from Allison Mack, and he's talking to her, and you almost see the manipulation happening right on screen. Where it was like the first time she'd actually talked to him, I think. And so he's talking to her about art and how it makes her feel and all. And you see her just crumbling and starting to cry just for because he's touched her. He's really knows her. He gets her, and you're like, oh my God, that was his superpower. He could just totally see somebody, zero in on it, and just take it. And it was like so creepy to watch that. The way he looked at people, and you could see him just sizing them up.
A lot of that, though, I think came from the hype about him. It's like if she had just met him in a bar and he started doing that, she'd be
all of that's intentional. Yeah.
Go away, little guy. But he did it in the context of being this genius that everybody's been talking about. He's Vanguard. I mean, they have this.
He doesn't even have a name. He has a title.
Right.
So obnoxious.
But he's the guy that they have those Vanguard weekends about. They celebrate his birthday. And so when you know that there's this dude called, they call him Vanguard, and he is this amazing genius. Everything he does, he's a genius at it. And it's like, who else does that remind us of? I'm the best.
I can't think of anyone.
Nobody knows more about it than me. And it's like if you paint yourself like that, and if other people, if you have other people around you, if you have a little cabal of thralls that will paint you that way because they're using you for something, obviously they're getting a cut, so they're gonna build on that hype. They're gonna build up your pyramid, and so then you have this hype around you, and then if somebody, and then the impression is like with L. Ron Hubbard or anyone, that there's zillions of people who worship this guy. They just think he's amazing. He's brilliant. Yeah. So when you meet him,
he's talking to me.
But your first impression of him is that, okay, this is that guy.
Right. And he's looking at me and listening to me. Like it would be very intoxicating. Yeah.
And it's hard to think, am I the only person that thinks he's not what he says? It's like, no, you're going to think, wow, all these other successful, cool people idolize this guy. There must be something to him. I'm going to look really hard and deep at this guy, and I'm going to find what it is about, in your subconscious mind, you've already been bought.
Yeah.
But you're in an office park in Albany, New York.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, they even talk about like how cheap it was. Like Sarah Edmondson goes, I walk in, it's this super cheesy 80s, cheesy videos, and it was very low rent. Like she was expecting this big ballroom, Tony Robbins, basically stadium, and bigger than life.
Or a mega church.
Have you guys ever done anything like that?
Or the Oval Office?
Have I?
Yeah.
I have not.
See, I'm not really into that at all, so I didn't really need it. But then Joe Berlinger did a film about Tony Robbins, and Joe Berlinger, I completely implicitly trust. I mean, we've known him for a very long time. He's an incredibly talented filmmaker. He's always been super smart, very cynical. So when he released this film that was basically a love letter to Tony Robbins, and then, was not like a expose that he usually does, I was like kind of blown away, like that's crazy. And then Joe Berlinger introduced me to Tony Robbins, and we did a little photo shoot with Tony Robbins in a billboard in Hollywood when they had his movie was out. And then Joe said, hey, you should go to one of his things. And I'm like, I don't know, they're expensive. And he goes, no, he'll just invite you. So Tony Robbins invited Chad and I to go to one of his events. And I thought, oh, it's free. He invited us. This is really cool. So we actually went, and, I'd never done anything like this before. And it was really fun. And I think what I got from it, I don't need more. Like I got what I needed to get. And actually, it sounds stupid to say it did change my life, but it did change my life. It was powerful. It zeroed in on all of the, the things I felt like I was, deficit in, which was I don't know how to deal with money. I'm an artist. I need to get more serious about how to, be more financially successful, things that I appreciated Tony Robbins was about. It wasn't about, the higher power and, be a stronger. It was not vague like that. There was a little bit of that, but it was more about like how to make yourself more successful. And I appreciated that grounded approach.
Was it one afternoon session or
No,
was it a
God,
couple
no.
of
It was
days, or?
5 days,
Whoa.
12-hour days, no breaks. So you see how this you had to bring, and I saw people coming in with suitcases. I'm like, what the hell? Like coming into a stadium and they brought meals. I didn't realize that there was no food and you had to bring your own food. We figured that out, but it was super entertaining. They had Tony Robbins was like every other day basically. And they had some other kind of coaches who would tell their stories, and those were also powerful. But I think the most, and when I see this Raniere thing, I see why people were drawn to the wrong person, but for the right reasons.
Right.
Is that everybody there was so friendly, so open, wanted to talk to you. It was always like, okay, everybody stand up and hug the person next to you. It felt so normal to do this to a total stranger, right? The coolest, and we did this the day after the 2016 election. So we were bumming like, oh God, Trump just got elected. We were depressed, right? So so we were primed for this. So I think what was so intoxicating about it, which I see in these documentaries, is you feel like everybody there is so supportive, so friendly. They welcome you. They make you feel like you're a rock star. You feel so wanted and appreciated. And then when you go back to your life, like we come home, nobody looks at you on the street. Everybody's like, stay away from me. And you get this, like, your walls go up, and your walls have been down for like 5 days. And you were like, this is what it feels like to be part of a bigger thing like this. And everybody would walk through the halls. They go, hey, and they'd wave at you like they know you. It was really refreshing and really cool. Now I can see that being super addictive to people, especially if you're feeling very vulnerable or, you need that kind of support.
Let me ask you this. After the 5th day, was there any kind of enticement to go to another event?
Yes. That's when it kicks in.
Was that hardcore? Like, hey, the next one is this, and it's going to cost you whatever.
That's the only thing I didn't like.
Yeah.
I saw, because, I love Beachbody, the whole, workout thing, and same multi-level marketing kind of set up a little bit where it's, coaches bring in people and you try and make money. So even though it was for a good reason, it's still that same structure. So as you're listening to all this incredibly powerful stuff and all, and Tony Robbins is amazing. I mean, he's just so cool, just incredible. Every day he was on, he was great. When the coaches came in, it's more of a sale. There was like, and they make you feel like, I want that, because it's like they had a financial weekend. You go to Tony Robbins' personal estate, and like Fiji or something crazy. You hang out and they talk about all these like millionaires who will financially advise you, and but it's expensive, so that there's a whole financial thing that I just was not willing to go. But a lot of people, including the Raniere, the Raniere victims, I'll call them, is that they just said, I need this. I'm just going to go into debt and do this.
There was that woman, Tabby, who obviously didn't have a lot of money, but she spent $75,000, something like that.
Yeah,
it was horrible, but
addictive. But you feel like just as one more class. Like if I take this financial thing with these guys in Fiji, I will be really smart with my money and I'll be able to make millions.
Yeah.
You want that. You want it. You don't want it. And then they sell you can have a personal consultation with the Tony Robbins coach for free after the thing. And I'm like, I don't want the coach. I want Tony Robbins. I don't want the flunky. So I sort of saw the structure already. I wasn't going to buy anything else, even though it was very intriguing because you want to go to these things. They were so, you get addicted to the feel good aspect of it. So when I'm watching these movies, I could see why it was so fun for people at first and why they really believed in it, because it does give you this high of being connected to something bigger and that, you're welcome there.
Well, I have
any of those things. Like, I mean, remember the 700 Club,
Sure.
Yeah, but that was religion.
Yeah, but it's same thing.
Yeah, but religion is like almost like the cult. Everyone accepts.
Yeah, everybody accepts it because I don't know.
Because you're promising shit because you're promising people a lot of shit you never have to deliver. So it's very enticing to be like, oh, I'll get this. It's like eventually, after it won't matter.
Well, I want to tell you about my one foray into multi-level marketing.
Okay.
Let's take a quick break, and I also want to talk about Seduced, but let's take a quick break. Okay. After this.
My name is India. I was in a cult for 7 years. When I was a child, I felt very loved, but I grew up looking for a more purposeful life. NXIVM was a program to make people's lives better.
I found a real deep sense of community. I felt like I was in the right place.
So how did we all end up in the clutches of a monster?
Keith Raniere is the most horrific cult leader.
He was someone that I really trusted.
I can't tell you how much guilt I feel.
My daughter. I had been in the presence of so much evil.
I had to ask permission to eat.
There's control of sleep.
Demeaning sexual acts.
It kept getting more extreme.
All over the globe, we don't know how many victims there could be.
The cruelty, it's beyond the pale.
I didn't want to be saved.
I had no idea the worst was about to happen.
So here's so when I had my health food store back in Boston in the 90s, there were a lot of people come in and try to do these healthy multi-level marketing products. So one of them was this thing called the laundry ball. Never have to use laundry detergent ever again. You get this ball that's like the size of a tennis ball, plastic, hard plastic, and you just throw that into your wash. And
I'm sure that would work.
Some sort of ionization would clean your clothes. So I said, I'll give it a try. And I tried it. And I just realized it's just the hot water that's washing your clothes.
Oh, yeah, there's that.
Yeah, but the point is, like, somebody bought this laundry. The laundry ball was like $150, but you never have to buy laundry detergent ever again. Unless, of course, the laundry ball, you lose it because it's the size of a tennis
Your
ball.
dog finds it.
Exactly.
Which is like, I have the dryer balls.
Well,
and every time I
different.
pull out clothes, the balls drop out. Which, yeah, those are about anti-static. Jones, my dog always runs over. He's like, I gotta get it.
But it's just like people that you can come up with any crazy idea, even something like that, and they're P.T. Barnum, exactly.
What is the magnet bracelets? Remember, everybody was saying magnets are
demagnetize or ions,
the polarity of your consciousness, and crystals. I mean, there's a lot of people who believe in that stuff. There's a lot of people who just sort of like the vibe of it.
Sure.
I mean, I like crystals. I love the fact that how they're formed and all that. I love crystals, but I don't think that they're going to bring me money, or.
You don't think the chakra is over, like when somebody's like doing this in front of your navel? That's you're going to the polarity, that kind of stuff.
Anytime somebody is selling you an invisible product, or anytime somebody is selling you something that is always free, but they've attached some sort of supernatural property to it, then
it's never free. First of all, never free.
But take something that's readily available, like a bag of dirt, and say, this is holy dirt, or this water that I got out of the tap is holy. There's something supernatural has happened to it that has increased the value of it and made it more valuable than this water, and I know I sound like George Carlin, but
well, the multi-level marketing thing's a whole other level though, because that's not even just like selling a product and people buy it, you're done. That's like recruiting people to sell it for you, who then have to recruit people to sell it for you. So it becomes this big pyramid of people selling, and it's not a pyramid scheme. That's not the same thing. This isn't a pyramid. A lot of people confuse multimedia, MLM with a pyramid scheme. It's not the same because the multi-level marketing is all about salesmanship. And, the thing is, it's so hard to make money. And that's what they sort of point out into this, which is basically what it was. These people that had to work their way up, they kept being promised, so much freedom, financial freedom, so much success, but it just never seemed to come because they had to do one more class or one more thing.
You're not praying hard enough.
And so it all becomes, again, they're sort of let off the hook because you just didn't try hard enough. You should have been working harder, and so you're like, ugh.
And that brings
us have faith.
So how was the thing you were talking about? How was it a multi-level marketing washing detergent ball?
No, it was like because we're a health food store, you can sell this stuff. So it was all about it was all about getting other people to sell to other people to sell, and so on and so on and so on.
It's like Amway.
Any of that stuff. The super blue green algae was another one back in the 90s. So. But speaking about somebody who wasn't making money, this dovetails into Seduced, which is the 4-part documentary on STARZ that's really focuses on India Oxenberg, who is Catherine Oxenberg, the actress from Dynasty, her daughter, who was indoctrinated, went into NXIVM like 2012, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And she was knee deep and got into DOS. But we get to see it from her perspective after she gets out, and goes back.
In the Vow, we keep hearing about India. If you watch the Vow, it's this quest of a mother. I mean, you really like Catherine Oxenberg.
She seems really cool.
She's an actress. She's like, Hollywood, not just Hollywood royalty, but
she's literally royalty.
And don't you love her mom? Her mom was
I loved her mom so much.
She's like this no nonsense princess,
Princess of
he just thought it was stupid.
Yeah, no, she was great. She was no nonsense. She
I loved her.
Bullshit, and she was like, oh, she's really has her shit together.
I always liked her scenes were great, but during the Vow, I mean, this is sort of spoilers, but you can tell just by looking at the ad that
and also reading the news
and reading. But Keith Raniere, is eventually captured, of course. But even after all this stuff is coming out, and all these people are what they call waking up. These people are sort of finding the strength to admit that this whole thing is a scam and a horrible, abusive exploitation, sexual abuse thing, and getting out. India was still this young woman who seems very sweet. You look at her and she's so sweet and nice, and there's nothing evil about her. She's not the kind of person who would stay with something if she really thought it was evil. You don't really get that from her.
Well, that's why she was so valuable to them, because she was another one of their lures of like, oh, well, it's Catherine Oxenberg's daughter's in our group, so it must be good. Right. So she was, and she never really was able to get past the financial barrier either. She's always kind of kept down and, kept in this inferior position and never really financially independent, because that takes a whole other level of, as we know, malevolence.
And she lost her inheritance to NXIVM. So she really didn't have any money. The money was gone. Whatever money was going to come to her, she didn't have any longer. So she was all in. She had nowhere else to go. But she comes across as she is a very smart, level-headed person. And in the last episode of Seduced, where they go, India and some of the other people from NXIVM go speak at Arizona State University to some law students.
I loved that.
And they kind of talk about their experience. And there's one gentleman in the audience who says, I always looked at people in cults and said, oh, I would never be that person. I'm too smart for that. I would never. But I realized that I could be that person, and I am that person, because they're not. So that's what I got out of Seduced was I could be seduced by a cult. If it was I couldn't personally, because I know I'm not a joiner. I quit Little League after one game when somebody yelled at me. It's just me.
I keep trying to join, and I don't want to.
No, I don't. I go, no, I don't. Just too much. I got enough problems, But
Mark has a voice.
I actually was crying. I said, I don't want this. I was forced to do something.
I want to use this opportunity to quit the podcast.
I can't.
Well, there will not be a podcast, and Mark and I have to do it alone. That's for sure.
Exactly.
Too much for me. I don't like where you guys
are
taking it.
But if you get anything out of this, it's like, if the right situation, the right type of cult, the right type of sales pitch can maybe get anybody in the right circumstances. So that's just like something kind of a forewarning.
I liked her, I can't remember her name, the one demo where she walked up in front of that class, and she walked up like they do in NXIVM, and she walked up and she was like, clapped her hand and bowed. And she goes, come on. Everybody. So she goes, everybody stand up, clap your hand and bow. She goes, see how easy that was? You're now in a cult. That was funny, because as I'm watching, I'm like, oh, holy shit. You think about how easy it is. When I was doing the Tony Robbins weekend, they're famous for walking on the hot coals, right? So you're like, there's no way I'm doing that. And so they set it up and they make it really scary. The whole day they're scaring the shit out of you about it. Like, you see them stoking the flames out front in front of the stadium. You see this big long thing of, coal, and it's on fire. And then during the thing they talk about, if you get injured, any kind of burns, things like that. And they're showing all this flaming video and it's scaring you, right? Because the whole point was you're scared, but you're going to do it anyway, right? So here we are.
Everybody else is doing it.
They said, take off your shoes. And this is something I would never do. It's another one of those, like, this is how they make you feel so safe and wanted. Everyone just took off their shoes in the stadium. Thousands of people take off, run outside barefoot. in a stadium. You're leaving your shoes at your seat, running outside in a parking lot with bare feet. And and there's this big, they're all like chanting, and there's a tribal, and you see Tony Robbins is up on the rooftop of this building looking down. I was like, whoa, it's like crazy. And I'm like, we're not doing this. There's no way. And then I'm like, you know what? We came, let's fucking do it. So we did it. And I'm like, see, that's how easy it is. You just get caught up in the moment. Your fear. This is why we're here. And you see how you just push it and you push it. And the next thing you know, you're with Keith Raniere.
Yeah, you look back at 2 years later, and I don't know how you feel about it. A couple of years later, you go back and go, wow, I just walked over hot Dodger Stadium or wherever it was,
Right. It's like,
why?
Crazy.
Weird,
it's very weird, but it was also a powerful moment. And that's where I feel like it can be used for good, because there is that fear of doing something like that. It's safe deep down because people wouldn't be doing it and there'd be a lot more going on, and the physicality of it. And the whole point was to scare you so that you would feel like you really did accomplish something. And when you went across those coals, you get the end, everybody grabs you and they're like, yay, great. It was great. And then you're like, wow. So if I'm scared, I should still try and push through. That's sort of the message. Like, if I'm afraid to do public speaking, if I'm afraid to invest in this business, I should try and get past the fear. But see, they use it in NXIVM. The fear is your instincts going, this is fucked up. I don't know if I want to do this. It's like, why am I getting branded? Branded by these women.
Naked.
Naked. A whole nude weird ritual is being filmed just for Keith Raniere's viewing pleasure.
And one thing that we haven't mentioned, there's something that there's a concept in here that they use in a lot of cults, whether in this one, they just sort of come right out and call it what it is. But in other cults, they collect what they call collateral, which is basically, it's what cult experts call collateral. But what it is basically it's something that, you have to imagine the Scientologists do, or else more people would flee. Why, you kind of wonder, certain celebrities who are in Scientology, there's always that question, what do they have on him?
Right.
Or people who bow and, do everything that certain presidents tell them to do. You wonder, what does he have on them?
Exactly.
Yeah. And in this case, you find out how a lot of the cults do it. They literally come right out to these people and say, we're going to need to get some collateral from you. We're going to need to get something, some really damning information from you, some really explicit photographs, or, some really horrible personal information that is condemning your family, or some really horrible thing that you would never want to get out. And if you don't have any, then go ahead and just create some for us, so that if you do, just so and the explanation isn't bad. It's not like we're threatening you, we're blackmailing you with this. It's just to prove your commitment to the organization.
It's like push past your fear. It's basically the push past the fear.
Exactly.
Give me this damaging information because you're committed.
Why are you afraid to give us collateral?
Right. So scary. So all these people, and that's the main thing too. No one's really sure where all that went. Where is all that?
Yeah.
Scary.
There is that playbook of how you start a cult, and how you cultivate a cult, and how you grow it. And
it goes way back.
Watch this, it goes way back. So it's before even the word cult,
Well, what I thought was interesting too about the documentaries back to back is that the first documentary is gorgeous, really well shot. Beautifully shot. I like where they would have the recordings of, just audio of Keith Raniere. I guess people were secretly taping. Who knows if it was even secret? He always wanted to be taped. But they would have this abstract colors and this waves of light during that whole thing. You felt very hypnotized. I feel like it was almost sort of giving you this feeling of being lulled into a cult. It sort of gave you that feeling of feeling safe. I loved how that looked. It was really unique in its beauty as a documentary. Like, gorgeous. Everything was shot really well. Everybody was well lit. Just had a really high end, big money feel to it. The only problem I had with it was I feel like it didn't go deep enough. Like, by the end of it, I felt like, what were the crimes? Like, I kind of get it, but they never really explicitly say what the crimes were. So when you see Seduced and you're on the inside, it's more traditional documentary. You just have talking heads in a house. You see some footage that they've taped. There's not a real glamorous, cool gloss to it. It's a more basic documentary, but you get to the nitty gritty from someone who was in the cult, India Oxenberg, her personal experiences and why it was criminal. And you start hearing about why it was criminal. So they almost are necessary to see together, because even though Keith Raniere is a creep and he's horrible, I wasn't quite sure what he did that they could even prove that was illegal, even though they kind of said what it was, like human trafficking, and you never really heard it or saw it. But in the second one, you do.
I felt the same way. I felt like I was watching it and I was like, it is weird and it is crazy, but these are adults. I kept sounding like his attorney who's saying, are we going to condemn the sports people who get a tattoo? Anyone who gets who works together. I mean, I worked on a film one time where everybody on the film, or I didn't, but a bunch of people who worked on the film got the same tattoo, and it's like you're like, well, they're
kind of tribal,
and they're all adults too. There's nobody here under 16 or 18
until you find out there were a few people that were under 16. That's where,
true.
But you don't really know for sure until the second documentary. But also the second documentary, which made it even creepier, is they had this kind of cool animation. They obviously didn't have the footage, right? They didn't have the footage the first one had of some of the meetings. Apparently that was all from them.
Right.
But in this one, you had the animation. It actually worked in a cool way because you saw animation of the meetings instead of video. Yeah. And then you saw animation of these horrible criminal acts, the rape and the
branding and all that.
The whole thing with India Oxenberg.
Taking the pictures. Yeah. That whole night.
Holy.
Yeah.
I mean, the way they showed the animation of him coming into the room as a silhouette and you see his head over her. Oh, just horrifying. And I was like, okay, the guy's a creep, right? He's horrible. And then you start seeing why he should be guilty of all of these horrible things. Because he was doing this to God knows how many women. Oh, God.
One thing you didn't get from either, well, maybe a little bit from the second one, was Nancy Salzman, who was it was really Keith Raniere's right-hand person. And her daughter, Lauren Salzman, you get some stuff, but you really don't get Nancy Salzman's take on this at all.
No.
Or not her take, but just what's her deal in all this? So where did she, like, what, was she involved in this? Was she not? Was she
what was her criminal act?
Yeah, because she might be going away for 20, 30 years or something, so.
Besides, I guess, empowering him, like enabling him.
I would love to see more of them. And there is a season 2 of The Vow, so maybe we'll get into that more. But it's there's a lot of levels to the show.
I think she was a real into manipulation, and it was like that whole idea that she had studied neurolinguistics, which is this thing of studying how presentation and speech and the timbre and the tone and the cadence of your speech can have psychological impact. And it was the same. I mean, when you study that, you cannot not study the Third Reich and Hitler's rise to power, because a lot of that had to do with his art department. You know what I mean? His presentation. You can't deny that the Nazis had an incredible art department, their symbolism and the way they staged their rallies, those hate rallies with the torches. I mean, they used all this Roman fight.
Well, and they had those films, the propaganda films were well made.
But again, by incredible filmmakers.
When you see Salzman, that's still not illegal to do that. I mean, none of that. So that's the creepiest part, is like, were they able to draw the line between the illegality, is that a word, of enticing and coercing these people to pure out manipulation and human trafficking? Like how that was the trick that they had to prove, which they did successfully prove, was how they crossed the line over to where Keith Raniere was guilty of like whatever, a million different, like I think 20 or some more charges. So he's going to go to jail for 120 years. So it's like, but I think the creepiest part was that you see all this footage of Raniere, all of these people talking about Raniere, and at the very end, you get a phone call while he's in prison. They have this audio of this phone call. That was so super creepy to me. Yeah. And he's already talking to the filmmakers using his same technique still. Yeah. Well, it's very surface, he's already criticizing, making them feel smaller and how he can help them make it better already.
And offering a reward for dirt on his opponents. How familiar does that sound?
Yeah, I know, right?
And also, outside of his prison cell, there's Nikki Klein and all these other proctors dancing and doing all these things. So what does that remind you of? I mean, it just doesn't stop.
Really scary.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's about Keith Raniere, but it's about a lot more than that too.
It sure is. I mean, you draw all kinds of parallels to what's happening in today's world.
Yeah,
these are both really good documentary series. They're made in a way, like you were saying. I think either Mark or Kathy said that the first one, The Vow, should be the first one that you watch. And Kathy was saying it's really beautiful and almost hypnotic in a way, and it kind of slowly takes you through the story. It doesn't like suddenly hammer you over the head with Keith Raniere as a bad guy. It kind of shows you what people saw of him initially
and what they were getting out of it, which was positive. Like the first episode is pretty much almost like a propaganda, like a commercial for NXIVM.
It was like I think the filmmakers saying this is how you get into a cult.
Yeah.
This is gonna be 9 hours of getting into a cult and then
getting out.
And then Mark Vicente has that great scene where he goes, "Nobody just joins a cult."
Yeah,
we didn't sit there and go, "Hey, everybody, let's make a cult. Let's join a cult." Like, the creepy part, he goes, "I cannot fucking believe I was in a cult." You just almost can't reconcile what you were doing and thinking to being in a cult.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
And just how heartbreaking it is. And the scenes with his wife, Bonnie, who I think is, to me, she's one of the most compelling people in the Vow. She's so, I mean, you can just tell that she was like, I don't like this, but I realize that if I step out of this, I'm going to lose my husband and my life, it's
and my support system and my life and my job and
all my
friends. Their whole life is this. It's not even just like they go to NXIVM for the job and then go home. The entire thing, your whole life is taken over by this.
But she was so sure and so strong. I mean, her I felt like she was the strongest.
Well, she was the first one to kind of get out, at least as far as the Vow is concerned.
Yeah, there was the other woman too that got out.
Sarah.
Oh, right. No, not Sarah. There
before
was
Sarah.
Right. Yeah.
I can't remember her name. The woman who's
the one who got sued a million times.
Yeah. The real estate.
But there's a scene in there where Bonnie and Mark Vicente, who are married, are talking to Catherine Oxenberg, and she's saying, I knew there was something really weird when I came over to their house, and there was a dog bed on the floor, and that was where she was being punished, and she had to sleep on the floor. And she was laughing. She was saying, "Oh my God, how weird! How weird!
They don't even have a dog. Why do they have a dog bed?"
Yeah, and she was having to sleep on the floor. She's like, "How weird is that? That's so creepy."
And they start laughing,
and they were kind of laughing. But then you look at Bonnie and Mark, and it's heartbreaking. And then Mark actually looks like he's about to cry, and he's like, "To me, it's
Mark loses his shit." Yeah, he goes, "This isn't funny.
It's not funny. I made my wife sleep on the floor."
He didn't even make her; she made herself. But he let her. That's even creepier.
Yeah, that's that realization of what they were, how deep they were in, and that's
that they couldn't see it, And again, we can apply that to present day on like how people can't see it. People that deny the virus or whatever it is. It's like you can't see it because you're too deep inside the cult.
And this is how you define yourself. And once you do something like that, once you define yourself by saying, "I think the virus is a hoax," or "I believe in this," then it takes strength. And what's great is to see films like this and to see people like Bonnie and Mark and Sarah and all these people who did find the strength to step away from that. And that, I mean, that ain't easy. That is
hardcore.
That is not easy to take.
Really
a
admire
step
them.
away from your reality. This was your reality for years, not just
your entire reality. Like not even just you think how you feel when you lose a job. Their entire life is built around this. Like it turns out to be a phony idea.
It's like imagine
spending
divorce.
Years and years. Yeah, God, so good. But really, I highly recommend them. They're really good.
And you really do. I mean, at first, you may be compelled if you're watching these documentaries. You may be a little bit compelled to say these people are so stupid and gullible. And how did they get involved? How did they believe this bullshit? Is so obvious to me. No, it's like you watch it and you come away from it like these people have a strength that unfortunately not enough people have the strength to admit when they're wrong and to admit when they've been misled and to actually do what Kathy brought up with where Mark Vicente actually, he said he sat down and he had that moment where he said, "Let me just try a thought experiment. Let me put my brain in that other place over here that believes this other thing." And when he did that, it was almost like, uh-oh.
Yeah, the light came on.
Yeah.
Crazy.
It's so
really good.
Do check it out if that.
Definitely.
It's
so
really
it's HBO
compelling.
is The Vow and The Seduced is STARZ and Hulu Premium. You can get STARZ anywhere you can get STARZ. You can get it.
Yeah. And they're both. We recommend both. I think they're both.
Good
there's
companions.
differences. There's huge differences between both, but I think they're both equal.
And Cecelia Peck is the filmmaker.
Cecelia Peck, good point.
Let's make sure we mention.
I think it's interesting that women directed both of these, which I think is important because it really was. There were male victims, but it was essentially,
it was exploiting women.
Debasement.
It was centered around exploiting women.
Yeah. So I like the
character.
Right. I like to get a female perspective from the director on that. So that was great.
So
and
check them out.
I guess we
check them out.
It's not really a spoiler, but we do have to bring up the fact that this cult was brought down. It ended, and I mean, there's still people.
Some people aren't even sentenced. It's so fresh, right?
Yeah.
But like it came out, like when this came out, we were in the middle of watching it when they talked about Raniere getting sentenced.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like wasn't even sentenced yet.
Yes. Yeah. So it's very current. It's not something from years and years ago. It's still happening now. So So check it out and check us out.
And it'll always be current too. I think it's something that we always need to be aware of.
Be sure and subscribe. I think there should be a little button down here at some point to subscribe. I don't know which way it is.
It's up. It's on my ceiling. But
it's in one of these directions.
Be sure and subscribe to our YouTube. We need it. And make sure and comment. We will respond. Make sure you write us a review on iTunes. Like all that shit. We love to hear from you guys and we really need it.
Yes, like
we need
us.
it.
We need to be liked.
We want you to be part of our cult.
The Cinemondo cult. And and just catch us on, we're always posting fun stuff on social media on, hashtag Cinemondo Pod on Twitter and then Cinemondo Podcast everywhere else.
Yes. Instagram,
Facebook.
Yes, Facebook. I know.
We are down with the internet stuff.
Down with it.
We really understand how it works.
And there's Patreon. If you go there and become a member, then we're sending out all kinds of cool stuff. Our merch guy, Burke, is sending out all kinds of neat things to people all over.
Patreon, get fun presents.
Yeah. So check it out. And thanks so much for listening. We really do appreciate it. It's a lot of fun to make these things, and we love hearing from you. So feel free to email us with comments and questions too.
And always make sure you call Mark Vanguard.
Mr. Vanguard.
Mr. Vanguard to you. All right.
Okay. Thanks very much.
Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. This is Cinemondo signing off.